Hi, Reality Riffing. I got the great joy of speaking to feminist theologian Meggan Watterson, who has recently written a book, among others, called Mary Magdalene Revealed, where she really opens up and starts to mythologize the Mary Magdalene Gospels, and it's quite a masterpiece. And I was so excited to speak to her about her experience of Mary Magdalene, both as a scholar and then her direct experience as a practitioner. And it was a deep conversation about the archetypal energy of the Mary Magdalene frequency, as well as some of the more specifics around the Mary Magdalene Gospels and how those teachings are incredibly relevant to us as humans on this planet right now. So I hope you enjoy this deep and profound conversation I had with Meggan Watterson. I'm just so thrilled and honored to have this amazing woman and leader and author with us today, Meggan Watterson, author of Mary Magdalene Revealed, and I know that is a newer piece of your work, but you have such a body of work that brought you there, and I'm just I would love to just hear how you kind of came into the Mary Magdalene frequency and secret teachings, or those teachings, and also just what else has brought you to this moment.
Well, first of all, thank you. You're so radiant. And my journey really began in church as a little girl. And I was raised feminist, really. My mom was not religious, she was feminist. And so she didn't know what to do with me when I wouldn't shut up about where did we come from, where are we going, why are we here? So she wanted me to ask the ultimate questions at church. And so I went, and we were reading the New Testament, and really my physical reaction to the Bible became this this path for me, because I broke out into hives and I got enraged, like more angry than I had ever been, as a little girl. I was so angry that God, or the ultimate, was being portrayed in this way, and that women's stories and women's voices were just completely absent. We were hearing about women, but not from them directly.
Right.
And I just, on a physical level, I knew that there was something else. I didn't know what it was. I just knew there had to be more to this story than what I was being presented with.
Yeah.
So that became my life's journey. I first wanted nothing to do with Christianity because it had freaked me out so completely. And so I studied all of the world religions, and I began to focus on the divine feminine. So all the stories of the different female saints and mystics and Buddhas all throughout the different religions and throughout history, I became obsessed with them. And so I did a master's degree first in that. And that was very healing for me, because I felt like here's the other half of the story, at least in other traditions, and here's what it looks like. And the feminine is fierce, the feminine is healing in ways that we aren't necessarily recognizing in the Western world. And then when I felt brave enough, and like I had all of these, energies with me of the divine feminine, I felt ready to go back to Christianity. So then I entered seminary, which is very, very intense. It's a 3-year, you're basically training to become a Christian minister.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my peers asked me, what are you doing here? Because I didn't identify as being Christian. I just was fiercely curious about the Christian story. And when I came across Mary Magdalene's Gospel, it was as if my body veered for me again, that this is it. This this is what I'd been searching for. This is what I knew somehow on a physical level was missing. And that was it for me. Her gospel just absolutely, it was like, sometimes when you hear the truth, first of all, it might piss you off or it might terrify you,
Right.
but your actual nervous system is calmed when you hear the truth. It's like, you finally are like, okay, now I know. And that's what happened with the Gospel of Mary. It was like, I've been inflamed ever since, I was a little girl reading the Bible, and then it was like, I read her gospel, and it was like honey through my whole nervous system. I was like, this for me.
Yeah.
So it was the body.
And so, where'd you get your master's degree?
So I studied at Harvard Divinity School for the Masters of Theological Studies, where I did the comparative work, which was phenomenal. And one of the foremost scholars of the Gospel of Mary is actually there, Dr. Karen King. And then for my Masters of Divinity, I went to Columbia, and their seminary is called Union, which I loved for poetic reasons as well.
Yeah. And so you actually were able to use the seminary experience to go deeper, or what started, was there a kind of moment where some of the more kind of esoteric and spiritual aspects of the Mary Magdalene teachings and some of these other the feminine frequencies from different lineages started to kind of embody for you differently?
Yes, that was that state of union, which for me is, encountering a love. It's like this great big unsayable love, and it's all consuming, all informing. And, for me, before really encountering Mary's gospel, I had this idea or this misperception that great big unsayable love was somewhere outside of me, right? Somewhere above me or beyond me. And what Mary's gospel returned me to was that it's within me. Of course, it's more than my individual ego, but that I can access it and return to that great big unsayable love again and again from within. No one outside of me, no external circumstances can ever keep me from that union. It's something that we all have access to, and this is what the metaphysical side of Mary's gospel really emphasizes, is that the treasure is within, and it's within the heart.
Yeah. And did you, obviously, specifically, Mary Magdalene, that piece, is obviously important for you and for us too. Our women's community is very connected to these Mary Magdalene teachings, as I feel, the rising of the feminine consciousness is
Right.
very embedded in that. But were there other, like the Taras and the Dakinis and the like other aspects of other theologies or lineages that also were kind of embodying and speaking to you?
Yeah, so I fell in love with the Tara Tantra when I was in divinity school because of this legend that the Buddha Tara refused to incarnate as a male Buddha until all sentient beings realized that there is no obstacle or limitation to our capacity to join with that great big unsayable love or enlightenment, however you may, realization, however you describe that state of union. There's no impediment for having incarnated as a female form. And that's a misunderstanding that runs throughout so many religious traditions, is that if you're in the female form, you have an obstacle to overcome that's greater than one would if they incarnated as a male form. And I had this crush on Tara because she said, to this group of monks, I make a vow to always reincarnate as a female Buddha until you are liberated from this idea that there is an obstacle, that somehow the female form is less worthy. And that's the aspect that I feel is so potent religious cultures and traditions, there's been that idea that the female form is somehow less than the male form.
Right.
And to me, what was so powerful and revealing about Mary's gospel is that at the end of her, basically sharing the secret metaphysical teachings that Christ gave to her, Peter doesn't believe her. And he doesn't believe her because she is a woman.
Right.
He says, are we to believe that Christ gave Mary, a woman, these teachings that he did not reveal to us? And so it's releasing and healing that idea that the female form could somehow be less than the male form. That to me is, that was something personally and collectively I felt like we all needed to address and realize.
And so, what have you particularly becoming do you actually actively, are you actively a minister? I mean, how are you using it? Yeah. Okay. I wasn't sure.
No. Yeah. I mean, I like to say that if there was ever a time, which I could see happening, and, maybe I just haven't found that congregation yet, but that where her gospel rang out as loudly as any of the other gospels, where her teachings and the significance of the fact that she was the one that Christ chose to embody and pass on these teachings. If there was a congregation that spoke to that and that believed that, I would be there in the front pew. But so far I haven't found, I always felt that my ministry would be through my words and through my teachings and through the embodiment of what I've experienced and encountered because of those teachings.
And have you had, has Mary Magdalene or some of these other emanations of the feminine consciousness, love, and all however words we could use to describe, have you had direct kind of experience or channeling, or how does it come to you?
So what first started happening to me, which was very, very bizarre, was I'm right now in Cleveland, Ohio, and I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. It's very Midwest. It's very salt of the earth.
Yes.
And I was overcome with the need to travel to the south of France. And that just, if you can kind of recognize how bizarre, it just was, raised in this feminist, very secular, non-religious family. And I was obsessed with this need to go to the south of France. And when I was there, in my early 20s, when I was finally there, I learned for the first time that was where legends say Mary Magdalene went when she was being persecuted by the Romans after the crucifixion. So I didn't know that until I was there, and I felt it and I knew it on that same level that you can't really speak about. It's just something you know viscerally in your body. I knew that I was there because of the ways in which my story is meant to move her story forward. So when I was on that first pilgrimage in my early 20s, every once in a while, when we would go into these different cathedrals, again, I'm not Catholic, I'm not religious, I'm not, anything, I would usually with ones with black Madonnas, which some say were brought over during the Crusades and are actually icons of Isis, the Egyptian goddess Isis, and her son Horus.
Yeah.
So, which is, a story of resurrection far more ancient than the one that Christianity teaches. But so I would fall on my knees and I would go into, this is the best word I can use, but it's from another tradition, a bhava, a state of bhava, of just divine love, like just this state of love where I couldn't move, I wouldn't want to move, and I'm just held by this weight of love. And it's streaming out of me, but it's also feels as if it's everywhere outside of me as well. And when I first encountered that, again, I still was feeling as if it was something beyond me, or, it didn't feel like it was something that I had anything to do with it. It felt graced. It felt random. I sort of felt like, it was almost like a hazard of being a mystic and a scholar was kind of like, this is like a work hazard, it's like
Right.
every once in a while I'll just, I'll be on my knees and I felt, like it was dangerous to go grocery shopping, like I never knew when it was going to hit me. And over the years, as I began to develop a spiritual practice of my own, and to, in a way, sort of take little sips of it. And as I began to shift that perception that love is outside of me and beyond me, as I really began to embody that and own it and recognize it's coming from within, then I didn't feel like I was being, taken, or like seized by that. But those are the states. They're really like it's beyond words to really describe, but it's this state of love that is love, that is love, that is love. And it's just it's all consuming. There are no thoughts, there are no room for an idea of God or me or self. It's just oceanic love.
Yeah, well, we don't have much, much if any, although I do think it's changing now a little bit, hopefully more with what's happening on the planet, that people understand or have any kind of support for that type of revelation, or that type of satori or spiritual experience, or enlightenment isn't really a word that I like the word in terms of some of the definitions of the more rebellious definitions, but just the bringing, that kind of revelatory or open, in the shamanic Toltec shamanism, they say the assemblage point shifts and the heart kind of bursts open, and there's, like you described. But there's no place for this in the Western culture in terms of understanding or supporting people in those types of states.
Right. Yes. And that's definitely what I found. I would freak out the people who were in, who would see it. And there was a lot of, projection about what was happening to me and all that kind of stuff. But no, there isn't a Hogwarts, there isn't like a place where you can go and you really have to, you're led, or that was my experience. Like I was led to certain books and I was led to certain teachers. But ultimately for my awakening and for my realization of what I contained, I had to be the one who, I so desperately sought. Like I really wanted somebody else to be who I actually had to become. Yeah. I had to be that person that would lead me through, the labyrinth of really understanding what this is and how I was going to be in relation to it in this life. So.
Well, and a lot of what my teacher and his teacher talk about in my lineage is that this time on the planet is a self-initiation. That's part of what is required for this next kind of quantum leap. Even though I believe strongly in the teacher-student relationship, though most humans that's not what they're interested or ready for. But that self-initiation process, this is something I think is like quite a important part of just the becoming a leader in this age. Can you talk any more about that? Like, what did that look like for you? How messy was it? Is it? Because it doesn't stop. But
the worth part is really significant. For me, I've always been writing, and I always understood that writing was my greatest contribution, is my greatest contribution. But that sense of being worthy of writing something that somebody else might need or might find guidance from, that took me, that was definitely that was a journey. Getting to that point where I understood it's really getting out of your own way. It's really understanding that who was I to judge whether I was worthy or not of speaking on behalf of Mary's story.
Yeah.
Who was I ultimately to judge that? I could not have contrived the magnitude of how much I needed to go to France, of how much I needed to find her cave, for example, or of what lengths I was willing to go to in order to realize, what really was already right here. And so who was I to judge my worth? And so that process of really, to me, the language I use is ego. And it's not to say that the ego is an obstacle. Obviously we have to have an ego. I wouldn't be dressed and, I wouldn't have shown up on time if
exactly.
we didn't have it. The ego is essential. The
Yeah.
ego is essential. It's just that for me, what's ultimate is the soul. And the whole point of being human is to be able to feel all of these feelings. In Mary's gospel, there's 7 different realms. There's 7 different climates that the ego can bring us to. And the point of being human isn't to not go into those 7 realms. That's not the point. We're not meant to hover above and bypass everything that we might be able to experience and encounter. The whole point of being here is to be able to be an ego and to get into one of those 7 states, but then to bring love to it, right? So like when we're in the depths of, say, for example, the 7th, which is the most difficult, is wrath, it's anger. When we're in the depths of it, what can happen is we can completely forget that we are also a soul. We're so identified with our anger or like a sense of righteousness, like we've been betrayed or we've been wronged, and we so identify with that ego that we completely forget about the presence and the reality of the soul. And some of us hang out there for half of our life. Or, we're derailed for great lengths of time because we really believe that we are that person that was betrayed. We are that, and we are only that.
Right.
And what Mary's gospel suggests is that we can also be the soul. And we can bring that great big unsayable love, that experience. We have the potential and the opportunity to evolve the soul into those places where before it was dark and there was no light, there was no love. And so that's really the practice, is waking up to the fact, oh, I am completely enmeshed in my ego right now. This is an egoic state. This is not the truth. And then bringing love to that state and then being able to choose to move out of it and be in a different state.
Mary Magdalene does not use the word ego, though.
No. So it's the word that's used in her gospel, which is so fascinating. And if I could get a little geeky for just a little bit. So it's a Greek word. She asked Christ, when I see a vision, when I have a vision, when I am able to perceive you, with what spiritual aperture am I seeing? How is it as a human being? Am I able to receive you? And he says it's neither with the soul nor the spirit, but the mind between the two that receives the vision. And then 3 pages of her gospel have been ripped out, which is very fascinating and just, very revealing about what, because if we can receive a vision from within us, then we don't necessarily need anyone outside of us, right? To sort of mitigate or clear a pathway. We contain our own power to vision. But so that word mind from the Greek is nous, N-O-U-S. and what it actually translates as, because it's not mind now in the 21st century, how we think of mind.
Right.
It really has to do with the heart. It's translated as the spiritual eye of the heart. So that capacity for us to be able to vision, to see clearly within the heart, that's what Mary reveals to the other disciples that Christ taught her. So when she's in one of those 7 states, she's able to bring that, whatever that egoic, state is, she calls them powers. They're simply powers. Later in Christianity, they become demons.
Right.
But in her gospel, they're just powers. And what she says is that she has this capacity to see the new, to vision, so she can see clearly what is the ego and what is soul. And so this is a practice and a process that she's revealing in her gospel that Christ taught to her.
And he would have given this in Aramaic, so how did it get into Greek?
So the translations, all of the partial fragments of papyrus, basically like the partial, we have 3 partial versions of her gospel. Yeah. 2 are in Greek and 1's in Coptic. Now, Coptic is the language that the Egyptian Christians would have, who most likely were the ones who preserved these scriptures. But the earliest Christians were teaching in that area of Asia Minor, which was basically most of, it was like a huge chunk of all of the Mediterranean. But Greek was the language that the monks, because the monks were really the ones who preserved, they were like the publishing houses. They were the ones that preserved these scriptures. And so they wrote in Greek, in ancient Greek. And so and there was an edict that went out in the 4th century when the Bible that gave me hives, the Bible that was, created and really became the foundation of Christianity we know today, during the 4th century, there was an edict that went out that said all other gospels that are now that aren't a part of this canon, which was the Gospel of Mary, they were to be destroyed. And there were some monks who refused to destroy it. And that's the only reason why we even have evidence of the Gospel of Mary, is because they buried them instead. And we have found 3, and who knows, we may find more.
And where were the 3 found?
All Egypt.
All in Egypt.
Which brings in that connection to the goddess Isis, and just to the goddess tradition in general, or the idea that every god has a goddess. Every male emanation of the divine also has a female emanation. And so that's deeply rooted in that land. And when that edict went out in the 4th century, that whole area became, buried treasure. A lot of these monks were like, we're not going to destroy this gospel, and many other gospels as well.
Yeah, there was other gospels that weren't included in that canon. What parts of Egypt do you remember? Because we were just there, and I'm trying to put this together for myself.
Oxyrhynchus. Oxyrhynchus. That's where 2 versions of her gospel were found.
What did you call it?
Oxyrhynchus.
Okay. And then
it has a spelling that's like, it's very difficult to pronounce in English, but
because is it possible that they have at least a replication of this at the Library of Alexandria? Because I feel like I saw in their room where they have all of these ancient papyruses, I feel like I saw this.
Part of the gospel, one of the...
It's a replication. It's a replication.
Yes. Yeah. That would make sense.
Yeah.
The one that is the most complete right now it's called the Berlin Codex, and it's in a museum in Berlin.
In Berlin, yeah. And so basically the monks were educated to be able to translate the Aramaic into Greek.
Right.
Because I don't know if you're familiar with Neil Douglas Klotz's work. who he's a scholar of kind of the intersection between Judaism and Islam and Christianity, and the kind of language, like he retranslates from the Aramaic the Beatitudes and a lot of Jesus's teachings, as well as some other formative texts. He translates from Hebrew, he translates from Aramaic and Arabic. And I think you might really be interested in some of this stuff. But one of the things that he talks about is just kind of the way that the sound of Aramaic actually, the sound itself is the meaning.
Like a mantra, yeah.
And how so much was lost when it was put in Greek. And the reason I say this is just because mind, in the sacred sound sciences, mind is so connected to mantra, and the frequency of the sound. So I just was wondering what you think about the transmission, because he gave her these teachings post resurrection. Am I right on this?
So scholars, have gone back and forth about what she's referring to, the timing of when she's referring to these conversations that they had. And there are many scholars that believe that she's talking about conversations they had while he was still incarnate, but that he was training her, he was teaching her how to be able to receive his voice and his teachings from within her heart, so that when he passed, she was still able to see in that particular way. So, for example, when you integrate her gospel and you really read her teachings all the way through, it isn't like an accident that she happened to be there at the tomb, like that she was the one that he rose to. It makes sense that she was the one who could see him, that she would be able to perceive him, because she had been already receiving a vision of him before he transitioned. And so, he may not have been physically present as she was beginning to learn, like when she says how wonderful it is, that Christ says to Mary, how wonderful it is that you are able to perceive me in a vision. And we don't know if he was incarnate as he was saying that, or if that was a dialogue that they were having just from within her. But my sense has always been that they were communicating in this way before he was crucified. And that was part of really, like, as you were describing with the words, the way words can contain energy and a transmission in and of itself. And for me, I feel like she received a very unique transmission that was meant to be fulfilled after his crucifixion, and that she would be able to continue his teachings, but receiving the visions from within her. Unfortunately, the disciples didn't believe her. She wasn't ultimately believed. They didn't believe that she could really channel, basically, him from the other side. My sense has always been that that's what had been opened for her, is that her heart was a channel, and that she could hear him, because that whole message of love never dies, love never ends.
Right.
When we truly have merged and have become one with someone else, whether they're in physical form or not, doesn't keep that person from being able to receive their essence, their energy, their frequency. I really feel that that's what was happening between the two of them.
Agreed. Because when basically in the yogic science, we talk about you're sharing a frequency between the arc lines.
Right.
And when you have that relay of frequency, which is a pituitary gland, it's an ESP or a chi thing, but it's a frequency relay that can happen through time, space. The person can be alive, dead. You can be alive, dead. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So in terms of this beautiful book that you've written, Mary Magdalene Revealed, what would just be for those who are either new to this material or just new to you, what are some formative things that you feel like people need to, especially now, understand or know about or hear? Just curious, maybe The book is incredible, and I think what I loved most. I'm not. I read books very kind of. I read a little bit, and then I'm reading. I read. I'm a.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read all sorts of things simultaneously. But one of the things that I like about it is that there really is a lot of beautiful, just combining a feminist theory with the Mary Magdalene teachings, and it has this, it's just incredibly unique that way. I'm wondering if you could just share with us some things that are important, or that you are, some touch points.
I feel that, part of my reaction as a little girl, that it was so physical and so visceral, I feel like a part of that message, what I was meant to live out, is that there is a connection between our ideas of the divine and the status of women. And that's really been at the heart of my work, is that connection, and that the whole journey of worth was really to understand that worth is never given to us. Worth is never something we can accrue or gain, or we can't acquire worth. Worth is something we claim. It's something we claim from within.
Yeah.
And for me, the healing, or I don't even know what word to describe it, but the vision that I think is most powerful for humanity is one where we truly understand that regardless of our physical form, there is a soul, and that soul is connected to an essence, or to divine love, or to an ultimate that really renders us all equal.
Yeah.
And that through thousands of years and all different traditions, that seems to be a red thread that is at the heart of so many of them, is realizing and being able to put into practice this understanding that ultimately we are a love that is worthy of such proximity to the divine.
I would even say that the word proximity isn't even close enough. Proximity is too far.
Hard to keep the breath. Yeah, it's such a revelation so often for so many, because we've had such ideas of the human being lowly, and the feminine or the female body being even lower than that, and to have this revelation that the divine is actually seeing out through our own eyes, right? Like it's within us. Yeah. And that there is no division. There is no above and below. There's just within, and within. Further up is farther in.
Yeah.
It's such a revelation, that embodiment.
That's a beautiful way of describing that. I thank you for that. That's very beautiful. Anything else in terms of these Mary Magdalene teachings? I mean, so many. I feel like there's just been, her kind of deliverance of teachings into the age of Aquarius is very real, and many women, including a friend of mine who is an incredible author, and I'm sure you know her, Isabel von Valois, who's I think here, well, she might be in bed now, but she just wrote a 750-page book of channeled information from Mary Magdalene, which she has to very carefully now translate into other languages, because she's German. And then there's a bunch of other incredible kind of channelings and different narratives that have come up really since 2012, including your book. What do you like? What's your take on all of just what has come forward, and anything else that you feel like we need to know as a women's community and as a community of humans that are interested in consciousness of her teachings that you could share with us?
I think to build on that concept of worth, like when we can get to that state of understanding that the human is opportunity for the soul to be present here. And one of the most powerful teachings that she revealed to me is that the human really stands between the created world and the creating world. So we can be the voice for the voiceless. If you think of the creating world, if we make it a 7, which is her gospel is very much about, but the created world, is the earth itself, the minerals, the vegetables, the plants, the food, the trees, all of the beloved creatures, and then, the entire material world. That's the created world. And then there's us. So that whole created world can't speak. And then there's us. And then there's the soul, the seraphs, the divine itself. And, if we think of that as like a continuum and we're right here in the middle, we have the capacity to be able to be the voice for the earth, for the animals, for the water, for the air itself, which needs us to speak with the voice of love on its behalf, to advocate for its health, for its wellness. And then we also have the opportunity to be the voice for the voiceless. An angel can't speak without us. The divine can't speak without it. If we merge with that, if we understand that power and position we have simply in being human, we can align in a way where we can be the voice for the voiceless. We can be the voice of love. And that to me is, it allows the humanity to have the dignity it has always had. And for us to realize this purpose, like so many people talk about, what is my purpose? What is just being human is purpose in itself. It's your soul's chance to be here.
Thank you. Let's take some questions from the live chat. So if you have anything you'd like to ask Meggan, you can ask it right here on the live chat, everyone who's watching. Somebody said, would you say that femininity is more receptive to this inner communication and channeling? Is there some way to become more in tune with this inner communication with creation?
I feel like it's very important to point out that those ideas of the feminine and the masculine, of course, is something that we all contain.
Yeah.
Male and female. Yeah. And the response of men to the Mary's Gospel and to Mary Magdalene Revealed has really blown me away, because the people who write into me are mostly men.
Yes.
And the detriment of the masculine being anchored just in men has affected all of us. And so that receptivity has, I mentioned the red thread that just sort of came up, but that, the heart is on the left side of the human body, and the left is known as the feminine, whereas the right is known as the masculine. What happened to me when I was studying the goddess Kali, for example, was because I was really anchored in this idea that the feminine was female and that the masculine was male. And what happened to me in this vision I had was that Shiva was standing on my stomach, and I was laying down, and I looked up at Shiva, and it was my own face. And so I understood that I contain the masculine and the feminine. And so when I say the feminine does receive more, I'm not saying that the female does. I think the feminine aspect in all of us is the aspect of us that is able to receive. It's the inward. It's going inward. We have the external expression of ourself, and then we have the interior world. And that's really just, it's a way of naming things that ultimately can't be named or broken down into parts. Yes. But so I would just emphasize that the feminine it has been imposed upon the female form for a very long time as the only attribute we really can acceptably express. But it's something that all of us possess and contain, and all of us need to be able to express and to experience.
And I'm writing about this in my book, which is that basically the idea of femininity has basically been and with us as willing participants, stolen from us, repackaged and sold back to us as this kind of this caricature of what femininity looks like for all of us. And it's not in any way gender specific. But that there's a whole nother understanding of that. I'm reading a couple of these. Somebody asked what book to read. Well, read Megan's book. It's called Mary Magdalene Revealed.
I also loved The Meaning of Mary Magdalene by Cynthia Bourgeau. She's an Episcopal priest and scholar. I adore her work.
Great. Do you like, what's your opinion on some of the more channeled work of some of these people that are coming out with kind of more narratives and channeled work of Mary Magdalene's?
Years and years ago, again, where, the body never lies and the body has really always been my greatest teacher. I was at a Barnes and Noble, and this may have happened to you before, but I was magnetized. I went to this book, and it was called the Magdalene manuscript.
Yeah.
And I opened it, I just sat down, and I inhaled the whole thing, and it was just, everything just felt like, yes, I know that story, yes. And I think for me, it's this experience, as you were saying, with that words carry an energetic transmission. I think we each kind of have we receive the information in a particular way, and then we're able to communicate it in a way that's unique to us in our own lived experience. And so I knew I would not write a book that was like that, but I knew that the book that I would write would be my form of allowing each word to contain an energy and an essence that would transmit something that's actually beyond the word itself, that creates an experience in the reader, not just information.
Yeah, it's very, I liken it in some way to some of the Mother Mary apparitions that have happened kind of simultaneously around the world. There's just this kind of refraction of the wisdom teachings that are kind of coming through different intelligences. And just as you said, her teaching being that if, we open up the channel of infinite to finite and allow for that to be whatever our particular unique kind of offering of we all have different kind of missions around that, and different well, we could use the term patron saints or different root gurus or whatever that are kind of leading spirit guides. Okay, these are a couple more questions. There's some questions about kind of the teachings of Mary Magdalene and sacred sexuality, her as a tantrika, healing our sexual trauma. What's your kind of take on that?
So that connection that I mentioned before between Mary Magdalene and the goddess Isis seems to run really deep. And at that time in the first century, monotheism wasn't a thing. People worshipped all different kinds of deities, and there were a lot of different cults. And the cult of Isis was very prominent in that part of ancient Israel. And so it's very likely that she had been exposed to or was a practitioner of an Isis cult. And that integrated the ideas that the human body was also a conduit, a pathway to the divine. The concepts of the body being sinful and, somehow lowly and base, those didn't happen for hundreds and hundreds of years. So the awareness that the body is a pathway to the divine would have been there. And I get the question often because as a scholar of religion, I was able to really look at this naming of Mary Magdalene as the prostitute,
Right.
and see the agenda, the political agenda that was involved in calling her a prostitute in the 6th century for the popes. It really had much more to do with making certain that there was an apostolic succession that was only male, even though before the 4th century there were female apostles and ministers and pastors, and there were the female aspect of the early Christ movement was very loud and prominent.
Yeah.
So naming her the prostitute was much more about silencing women and taking the authority of her teachings, divesting her gospel of that authority. So, I try to emphasize that this isn't about, suggesting that the body or sexuality is in any way less than really the church threw the whole issue of sexuality and the silencing of women all onto that story with Mary Magdalene. It's just that historically, factually, she was not, we have no proof of her being a prostitute. She may have been involved in the ISIS cult, but that wouldn't have been prostitution in the way that we conceptually understand it now.
Yeah.
So that idea, although beloved to many people and for great reasons, just in terms of scholarship isn't correct. It was something that the Catholic Church has apologized for and has admitted was a fiction created in the 6th century.
Really? They apologized for it?
Yeah. In 1969, a formal apology for calling her a prostitute.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And now she's been rehabilitated by Pope Francis. So instead of the penitent prostitute, she's to be referred to as the apostle to the apostles. And that just happened in 2016.
Wow. Fascinating. People are asking, can you speak on the relationship of the Gospel of Mary to the Gospel of Thomas, which has been more recently rediscovered?
I love the Gospel of Thomas.
Me too.
So the Gospels that I write about primarily in Mary Magdalene Revealed are Mary Magdalene's Gospel first and foremost, but then also the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Philip. And those two Gospels were found among the Nag Hammadi findings, which have been categorized and sort of labeled as Gnostic. But it's always important to emphasize that terminology, that idea of Gnosticism, it's not that there was a group that referred to themselves as Gnostics. What they're referring to is this early form of Christianity before the 4th century, where there was this emphasis on spiritual transformation happening from within us.
Right.
And that it happens through this purification of the heart and this idea of being able to learn how to see with the new, with the spiritual eye of the heart. That was, and that what they were claiming or what they were wanting to put forth is that a soul can speak on behalf of Christ, not based on whether they're male or female.
Right.
But based on the level of the transformation, that the spiritual transformation they've gone through, that allows them to see with that kind of clarity. And so that obviously that became heretical in the 4th century when the church was being usurped and really taken on by Roman authorities, where, Constantine wanted this rebellious, cult called Christianity to become the empire's religion. And so it needed to look a lot more like the hierarchical structures that already existed, where men really held those highest rungs of power and authority.
Right. Interesting. So interesting. So I feel like we could talk to you for a long time, and really appreciate you and all of the work that you're doing and continuing to do. Are you writing right now? Are you writing a new book?
Well, I was working on an online course that we were going to film in the south of France, but we are we have just decided recently that we're going to move it to next summer, given the state of COVID and the global crisis around that. So I'm going to finish writing that, and I've also just been doing some fiction writing about Mary Magdalene, which has been fun.
Oh, cool! You guys, I want you to meet Isabella. You guys, I think, would really resonate. And I know you're friends of we have a mutual friend, Lisa Lister, who is dear to our whole community. And maybe if we can get our dates right, we can get you to Rama Festival next summer.
I love that.
So there was a question about just current events and everything that's happening. What's your kind of either, what's come in through your channel, or what are your opinions on this?
Well, I was speaking before about, the egoic states that Mary really reveals to the other disciples, that many of us can get very comfortable with and very identified with. And what this state of the world is really forcing on all of us is to have all those egoic identities drop away. We're not able to, many of us have jobs. Some of us can't even be in relationship with the people we were in relationship before. We're really being forced to go inward in a way where we have never had to before. And, the beauty or the opportunity that's in this crisis for me is that chance to really look at what remains, right? When all of those egoic identities, once we can get past the discomfort and the pain of losing those identities, which is real, but what remains is what is the truth of really who we are. And so we have this unexpected expanse right now. And for many of us, we have no idea how long, this is going to last. And for me, it's this unbelievable opportunity to return, to those states that I used to enter into unwillingly and like out of the blue. But for me, it's this opportunity to return again and again to that great big unsayable love inside of me. There is nothing right now keeping me from it. And there's no circumstance now that could convince me that love and that truth and that power isn't right here within me. And so for me, I'm just cultivating what that's like to live from there, to see out from it.
Yeah, I do feel like this is the most, it's unbelievable circumstances that have basically put us into some sort of spiritual retreat. And a lot of circumstances that are very pressurized that oftentimes will push us further into the demand to uplink to the divine that maybe we don't have when things are easier.
Right.
Well, I'd love to finish our conversation with a prayer or meditation led by you, if you would be open to it.
Yes, this is my practice. This is what I rely on daily. I refer to it as the soul voice meditation. It really comes from the tradition known as the Christian contemplative tradition. And it's this idea then that spiritual eye of the heart is the highest aspect of the soul. And it's an aspect that we're able to perceive while we're embodied, while we're here. But it's the aspect that will continue on once our physical form passes. And so we can cultivate, bringing all of our consciousness, calling our power back from all times and all places, and just bringing it into the heart. So the soul voice meditation is really just anchored with 3 breaths. The first intentional breath, we descend into the heart, which is ascension, really. And then the second breath is connecting to that spiritual eye of the heart, to the new, to the soul. And then the third breath just allows us to open our eyes again, but now seeing out, hopefully anchored in that great, big, unsayable love, rather than whatever egoic state we were identified with before we went into it. So what I do to begin is I simply close my eyes and I just sort of shower gratitude for this chance for my soul to be here, the body as the soul's chance to be here, this phenomenal opportunity to be human. So I just really immerse myself in that state of being, of gratitude. And I take my first intentional breath and just imagine really sitting down inside myself. Just feel that weight of entering into the core of who we are, of allowing every other thought, idea, energy, expression to fall away, just drain out through the soles of our feet, and just drop into the heart, drop into the center. And then the second breath that we take is to merge with that awareness of this limitless soul, this eternal flame, this unspeakable love that we are. And just allowing ourselves to merge with it and encounter any emotion or message we might be ready to receive. And then the third breath is again drenched with gratitude that it's this simple to return to the truth of who we are. Gratitude that love is within us and that we contain the answers we so often seek outside of us. We contain them within. So that third breath is drenched with gratitude and then just allows us to open our eyes, so tethered to that core of who we are, knowing it'll guide us to those we're meant to encounter and help us speak from that truth.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Meggan.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so good to meet you, and thank you for all your work. How can people stay in touch with you?
My name is bizarre. It has an egg in it, so it's 2 G's. It's Meggan, and my last name has 2 T's, WATTERSON.com. Has everything, all my books, and links to a TED Talk, and ways to just get in contact with me directly.
Amazing. Thank you. Bless you. I hope to see you soon.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Reality Riffing. These are conversations that I think are important with people who are doing great things in the world about subject matters that need to be discussed. If you enjoyed the content, the conversation, please feel free to share with your people, share with your friends and family, rate the podcast below, and also subscribe.